Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Frank Abellini. I'm the president of Ad Club. So nice to see such a big crowd today for our annual Ad Club Newspaper Day event. I think we have over 350 attendees. It's a wonderful turnout. As many of you know, Ad Club is a volunteer organization that exists to support the many facets of the advertising and marketing industry with our outstanding variety of annual events. Our events usually generate revenue through paid attendance and sponsorships. And at the end of each year, our profits go to support dozens of student scholarships, along with a substantial donation to our very good friends at NABS. While many of those typical in-person events are on hold these days, we're able to host these events with few event-related costs, these webinars, I should say. So I'm extremely happy to say that all the revenue that's being generated today through News Media Canada's sponsorship will be going directly to NABS. So a massive thanks to News Media Canada for their generous sponsorship, and a big thanks to all of you for taking time out of your day to attend. Before I pass you over to Mr. Norman Lang, I just want to mention how extremely proud the Ad Club board is of our Newspaper Day committee for pushing forward with this webinar. I know it was a lot of work, so thank you to everyone that played a part in today's event. Today, you'll be listening to a number of expert panelists while they discuss the impact of COVID and the need for trustworthy news and information for Canadians. Sit back, relax, and don't be afraid to use the Q&A feature to ask questions and get involved in the conversation. Norman Lang, take it away.
Thanks, Frank. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Norman Lang. I'm the Managing Sales Director at Torstar Media. I'm the chairperson for today's virtual Newspaper Day. On behalf of the Advertising Club of Toronto, welcome to Newspaper Day 2020. It gives me great inspiration and personal pride to launch our event today. Canadians more than ever are reading newspapers in print or digital formats, thanks to increased access to news content through digital platforms. Readership is strong across all demographics. 9 out of 10 Canadians read a newspaper, either in print or digital format, at least once per week. Given the heightened levels of global mistrust, there is a clear and continued affinity for reliable reporting. Newspapers continue to be the go-to source for credible, trusted, and independent news for Canadians. Newspapers today and in the future play a unique and distinct role in the lives of Canadians. Thank you all for this today. We realize your time is extremely valuable and that we're all moving into the most important period of the year for our medium and for our business. Our committee has worked tirelessly over the last few months to bring you a program that is exciting, informative, and we hope inspiring. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Newspaper Day Committee. From Star Media, Carrie Anderson. From Torstar, Heather Spicer. From the Globe and Mail, Sarah Fleming. From the Globe and Mail, Nancy Love. From Glacier Media, Annick Pierre. And from Postmedia, Shelley Falaco. And as Frank articulated, I'd also like to thank and acknowledge our 2020 Newspaper Day sponsor, News Media Canada. All proceeds from today's sponsorship will be provided to NABS to assist our friends and colleagues during this difficult year. In addition to News Media sponsorship, they have provided us with 5 gift packages from the limited edition Champion the Truth capsule collection, celebrating Canadian newspapers led by Haley Elsager. The winners were randomly drawn from registration before today's event. All winners will be contacted by News Media Canada by email to secure their mailing address so the gift packages can be delivered by mail. The winners are Eric Lawson from Free Press, Kevin LaCour from Glacier Media, Natalie McDuff from the Globe and Mail, Tina Osborne from the Hamilton Spectator, and Ann Weatherall from Star Metroland Media. Congratulations. It is great pride and honor that I introduce our moderator and panelists for today's discussion. First, our moderator, Natalie Turvey. Natalie is President and Executive Director of the Canadian Journalism Foundation, a not-for-profit organization that fosters excellence in journalism through education, research, and one of the industry's most prestigious annual awards and fellowship programs. During the last decade, Natalie has enhanced the reach and relevance of the CJF by introducing new journalism awards and fellowships, and by expanding the Foundation's monthly public speaker series, CJF J-Talks, across the country. Under Natalie's leadership, the CJF developed a national news literacy program to bring greater media literacy to students, and later expanded the program to voting age citizens to help all Canadians understand the difference between fact-based journalism and misinformation in the digital world. In 2018, Natalie spearheaded the first ever World News Day to create public awareness about the value of fact-based journalism in our society. This year, Natalie led the launch of a Black Journalism Fellowship program to develop emerging talent, give rise to Black voices and Black stories in Canada's major media. Our panelists: Jordan Bitoff. Jordan is the publisher of the Toronto Star and co-owner of Torstar Corporation, a Canadian media conglomerate. He is also a partner in Northstar Capital with investments in numerous sectors. Previously, Jordan launched Great Moments in Catering, which became Canada's largest privately held event catering company, serving the Molson Indy, Tennis Canada, and numerous institutions. He also contributed significantly to the startup of the Toronto Raptors Basketball Club, the first NBA franchise awarded outside of the United States. He was a board of director for Western University, former member of the Toronto International Film Festival Board of Directors, and a former member of the Canadian Advisory Board for Right to Play. In 2012, he was a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal for his philanthropic work. Jordan is a graduate of Western University. He also holds a position of honorary consul to the Republic of North Macedonia. Welcome, Jordan. Robert Benzie. Robert is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. He's responsible for coordinating the provincial political coverage for Canada's largest circulated newspaper. Before joining the Star in 2003, he covered Queen's Park and Toronto City Hall for the National Post, a paper he helped launch as its deputy Toronto editor in 1998. Prior to that, he worked for the Toronto Sun and the Ottawa Sun and was a National Newspaper Award nominee for feature writing. In 2010, he received the Mary Deanne Shears Award as Toronto Star's Reporter of the Year. Welcome, Robert. Philip Crawley. Philip is the publisher and CEO of the Globe and Mail, Canada's national newspaper. He oversees the strategy and operations of the Globe and Mail newspaper, websites, including theglobeandmail.com, reportonbusiness.com, and globeinvestor.com, as well as magazines including Report on Business. Since joining the organization in 1998, Philip has guided the Globe and Mail through intensive newspaper competition, led it to highly successful leadership in new media and online products, while maintaining high standards for editorial and production quality. He is chairman of the Canadian Press and the Canadian Board of AAM, and a board member of the Canadian Newspaper Association and the World Association of Newspapers. His voluntary activities include board membership of the Sunnybrook Foundation, the Charter for Business, which raises funds for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award in Canada, and the Sir Edmund Hillary Foundation. He serves as honorary consul for New Zealand in Toronto. Philip was born in Northumberland, England, and graduated in English literature and literature at Manchester University. He lives in Toronto with his wife and family. Welcome, Philip. Rita is an award-winning journalist. She is a senior business writer and columnist in the Report on Business. Her previous roles at the Globe and Mail include senior editor, financial service editors, and Canadian business columnist for the Report on Business magazine. Rita returned to the Globe in July 2016 after spending about 2.5 years as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal's Canadian Bureau. She has a Bachelor of Journalism and Political Science and an MA in Canadian Studies, both from Carleton University in Ottawa. Welcome, Rita. Andrew Mcleod. Andrew was appointed Postmedia's President and Chief Executive Officer in January 2019. He joined Postmedia in 2014 as Executive Vice President, Financial Officer, appointed President and Chief Operating Officer in 2017. Andrew also currently serves as Director on the boards for Waterfront Toronto and Communitech. Prior to joining Postmedia, Andrew has held several senior executive positions, most recently as Senior Vice President and Regional Managing Director, North America at BlackBerry. Welcome, Andrew. Heather Person. Heather is Editor-in-Chief of the Saskatoon Star Phoenix and the Regina Leader Post, the two major daily newspapers in Saskatchewan. Heather's earned a bachelor's degree at Spring Arbor University in Michigan and is currently wrapping up a master's in administration in leadership through the University of Regina. Her early career was based in British Columbia, but she came back to her home province 15 years ago. Her team have captured both National Newspaper Awards and Canadian Journalism Foundation honors for their investigative work and for coverage of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. She is the first Saskatchewan-based professional named to the Canadian Journalism Foundation Board. Welcome, Heather. And welcome to all. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Natalie to start our panel discussion. I think all on the call will have an unbelievable afternoon, and I really look forward to the discussion. Natalie, over to you.
Thank you, Norman. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you. I applaud the Ad Club and its supporter News Media Canada for hosting this important event celebrating newspapers and journalists, our information heroes, at a time when we need quality, fact-based journalism more than ever to keep our communities informed, safe, and healthy. I bet a lot of us have some choice words to describe 2020, and they might not appear in most dictionaries. It should come as no surprise that even the writers of the Oxford Dictionary could not pick one single word of the year to define the one we're living. And while the unprecedented use of unprecedented was high on the list, COVID-19 and lockdown have become the key words we live by. COVID-19 and lockdowns around the world sent the global public back to more trusted news sources with a willingness to pay for news, according to this year's digital news report from the Oxford Reuters Institute. So to start our panel off, what makes a trustworthy news source, and what is your organization doing to ensure trust and transparency when reporting the news, especially during a pandemic like COVID-19? Let's go to the view from our publishers. Jordan, as someone who has recently been in the news, having taken the helm at Torstar and busy rolling up your sleeves, I know people are curious to hear from you.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you very much. Thank you to the committee. We're having a bit of a technical glitch here, so I apologize as we work through the issues. But I want to commend Norm and the entire committee. I want to commend the other panelists. It's an honor to be here today. And, you know, this is a bit of my, I guess, my coming out party with the folks in the industry. As you heard from Norm's description of my background, I don't have any newspaper blood in me, other than I started as a carrier when I was 10 and had a number of roots. But I've always been very, very passionate about newspapers, and like all of us on the call today, I would say that I'm a lover of print. I'm a lover of technology, and really, you know, the opportunity when it presented itself to Paul and I was an opportunity to take on an incredible brand in the Toronto Star and all the other assets. The community, the 73 community newspapers, the 7 dailies that we have, and to really take this incredible brand and to, I won't say resurrect it, but to take it during a very challenging time in an industry that is being attacked, as we know, on all fronts, from technologies and other things, and I'm sure we'll get into that later on. But we saw this as a great opportunity to use this as a platform to build on the legacy of great journalism that the Star has had and all of our publications have had. And as we got a little deeper, and as we all know, you know, the deeper you get into it and the more you fall in love with it, you realize what we have and the ability to hold our politicians accountable, the ability to take on a topic like COVID and really be the mouthpiece for a city, for a country, for a province, and being able to, again, hold our politicians accountable, be able to spread information and share information. And you know, our team has done an unbelievable job on that. I'm very, very proud of it. And then as we go along, you begin to realize that, you know, things like climate change, taking that on, holding, challenging our leaders and finding where the good leadership in this country, where are we after the pandemic? Where are we going? All we talk about is today, and we're hearing about a vaccine, and we hear about, you know, Operation Warp Speed in the US and Operation Wait Speed in Canada. So how do we use this wonderful platform that we have to be able to inform our readers and inform society? We removed the paywall. It was a huge part of it during COVID so that we could share the information. The other part I just want to talk very briefly about is really the transformation of the business. So we all know, we all talk about digital transformation, and we get very excited about it. We know that we're a little bit behind the times as an organization. Our peers at the Globe and Post have done an exceptional job, but we're coming on, and we're coming on very, very strong. But what we also have done, and this goes back to me not being a newspaper person, but being an entrepreneur, is we're looking at different ways that we can enable our business to get better. And what does that mean? It means things like we launched a couple of weeks ago, parcel delivery service. So we've launched this incredible parcel delivery, which we all know e-commerce is coming on very, very strongly. That last mile of delivery, there was a challenge in the marketplace because of it coming on in COVID. And so what did we do? We took our thousands of contractors who were delivering papers, and we've turned them into, for lack of a better term, an Amazon delivery person. What that allows us to do is, as we go and we touch our millions of subscribers across the province and the communities and in the city, we're able to leverage that newspaper. And so the cost, which is one of the highest costs of delivery, we've taken down significantly. What does that allow us to do? Hire more journalists. And we're going to make a number of announcements on that. We've relaunched our intern program, which was an incredible program here, and we call it our farm system. And so we see a very, very bright future here at the Star and in our industry. And I look forward to the conversation today. And I know that together and united, we can take on Facebook, we can take on Google, and we can have the federal government and all of our leaders realize the importance that we bring, and the fact that what's happening, all this craziness that's happening south of the border, we as a country, we as an industry can shed a lot of light on that and do a lot of very, very good things.
Thank you, Jordan. You buried the lead. I understand your first job ever was delivering the Toronto Star. We are going to move on to Andrew Mcleod to talk about trust and transparency across your titles and for your audiences and communities across the country.
Yeah, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think, also as an immigrant to this space, I sort of grew up in technology, so I don't have the deep, rich background that say some of my colleagues would on this forum. But from my perspective, I think it's adhering to the journalistic principles that are at the core of what we do every day, and ensuring that we instill those and reinstill those in our people, and ensuring that we continue to provide the coverage and support. I mean, many of the different mastheads that Postmedia has they're part of the fabric of the community. We have many titles right across Canada and many towns and communities, and they're the focal point for where people in those locales get their information. And trust is earned and built, in some cases, over 100 years. So I think it's just continuing to provide that trusted role that we do. And it's maintaining those principles and continuing the work and continuing to earn the trust day after day. And that would be how I would state it.
Thank you, Andrew. And Philip, over to you to talk about trust and transparency at Canada's national newspaper.
Yeah, thank you. This year has been terrible in many ways, but what it does underline when you're dealing with a global story like the pandemic is that the demand for news that people can trust is really very evident. And in that respect, it's been good for our number one priority as a business, which is to grow our digital subscriptions. Jordan mentioned in his remarks, and by the way, Jordan, I hope you're not coming to hire any of our journalists. Please stay off that. You know, taking the paywall down, I think in March, April, roughly half of our content is behind the paywall. So to take down the paywall is a big decision, because clearly we're losing subscription opportunities when we do that. But what it did very rapidly was double our traffic instantly, because people were so thirsty for information on what was going on, particularly in those early weeks when it was pretty scary as to what was going to take place. The result is we got to reach a lot of people who would not normally have been looking at the Globe and Mail. And why were they coming? Because we've got people like Andre Picard, the health writer, who probably makes the best sense of what government health officials are doing in Canada dealing with the pandemic, the things they get right and the things they get wrong. And people really do look for that insight, they look for that context. So that has been contributing towards a significant growth both in our traffic and our digital subscriptions. You know, on the other side, like most people, ad revenue on the print side is down about 30%. And I think that's in many cases, as you look around the world, it's been worse than that. So some of those losses of revenue are very significant indeed. But to your original point, it does underline the demand from the Canadian public for content that in times like this, they really want trust and credibility.
Thank you, Philip. The first principle of journalism is to seek the truth and report it, to put the facts in the hands of people. To get the information they need, more than half of Canadians say they've relied on local, national, and international news outlets as a main source of information about COVID-19. So what can we do better to ensure that reliable and potentially life-saving information is getting into the hands of Canadians? I'd like to bring in our journalist and our editor, Heather. Heather, given the spike of cases we're seeing in Western Canada, how can we ensure that potentially life-saving information is getting into the hands of your audiences?
I think there's a couple of ways that stand out for me. We are there every day at those daily press conferences, which people really, really want to hear what the officials have to say. They want to know what the premier has to say, the health minister, but they really want to hear us ask tough questions, and the questions they would ask if they could be in that room at that press conference. So we get many, many requests. Please ask this question. So we're the face of the public in that room. I don't know when I've seen when press conferences are more important to the public, and the interest of them hasn't waned substantially over time. So it's been a very interesting kind of dynamic there. The other thing that we really have had to focus on, and I think it's very important, is bringing relatable people into the discussion. There's a lot of isolation, and people want to see their own experiences reflected in the people that we're talking to and understanding the data. So it's really important that we're speaking in a tone that is, I would say, almost friendly, that it's accessible, that we're not taking the data and hitting people over the head with it, but we're helping them understand it and bringing them people that they can relate to.
Thanks. Robert Venzi, bringing you in here. I know, to build on Heather's insights, I know you're following, you're distilling, you're reporting on what's coming out from government and officials. Can you speak to how you're getting that potentially life-saving, that important information into the hands of your audiences?
Well, you know what? Thanks so much, Natalie. And I think it's like Jordan was saying, we are trying to hold our leaders to account, our political leaders, our public health official leaders, our doctors, and our business leaders to account, and to explain to our readers what is happening. And I think the best way that we can convey that is through interesting stories, and through stories that people can learn from and can see themselves in. And that's not always easy. I mean, the COVID pandemic has been going on now for more than 250 days. We're all sick of it. And yet we still see tremendous readership for our stories because there's a thirst for information. And I mean, every morning in my house, all these 3 dailies are delivered and poured over because I'm interested, my family's interested in what's happening in our community. And I think that the responsibility on our as journalists is to convey it in an interesting, palatable fashion that people can digest and understand, and then can go about living their lives in as best and safe a way as they can. I don't think we should be scaring people by telling them the sky is falling all the time, or also saying to them, look, everything's gonna be fine because the vaccine is coming maybe 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now. So I think context is very, very important. And that's where we in credible media like the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, and so on, that's where we come in, I believe. We have credibility and context and give perspective that our readers can then look at that information and say, this is trustworthy information. How can I live my life in a safe and sane fashion?
So Rita, Tricia, over to you. Is there more rigor to your work in an environment where information and facts seem to constantly be evolving? How has that changed your reporting?
Well, my byline is the bond with our readers. It's a measure of trust. So, just to build on what Rob Benzie has said, we take the task very seriously here. I don't think that I have ratcheted up my standards. I think I've always been that way, and I think we've always been held to a very high standard here at the Globe. I do want to answer your question in a slightly different way, just given that I'm a business columnist. I have been thinking about this issue a lot, and I think that part of the problem is that we need to help readers better identify what is fake news. And I think regulators do have a role to play here in the crackdown on fake news. And I don't believe in censorship. I'm a journalist after all, but I do believe that, in a pandemic, this issue of public safety comes to the fore, and traditional news outlets face consequences when they publish inaccurate, libelous, or otherwise harmful content. And, I was reading this paper by a think tank, CG, and one of the things they point out is that many of these social media platforms actually boast to advertisers that they have detailed knowledge of user-generated content before it's published. And so I realize this is how they make money, but it does beg the question as to why that there hasn't been a much more aggressive crackdown on and removal of such harmful content.
Thank you, Rita. And we will get more on misinformation in the discussion later in this hour. 2020 has also been a year of racial reckoning across industries and institutions. Canadian newsrooms and media coverage have been called out for not being truly representative of our country's racial diversity. And we know that news organizations are making great efforts to address this gap, but racial inequality persists. As an industry, we need to rethink our approach to this problem by addressing it in a more meaningful and systemic way. So for our publishers, what are your organizations doing to improve diversity and inclusion in your newsrooms to better reflect the audiences they serve? And Andrew, I'm going to start with you. Postmedia has made great strides with gender diversity. We see Heather as the first woman holding a top spot at those titles, Lucinda Choden at the Montreal Gazette and others. But can you speak to Postmedia's approach to inclusion and diversity initiatives in your newsrooms?
Yes, certainly. Look, it's a very serious and very important issue. I think the way you framed it is the way we're trying to approach it, which is you need to look at it through a systemic lens, and you have to have a meaningful approach. When it was really pertinent this summer, from my personal perspective, I saw a lot of organizations, I'm not referring to the ones on this call, but corporations around Canada and America, they would issue press releases or they would affirm certain values. And that's easy to do, but at the end of the day, it takes a lot of work, and you have to sit down internally. You have to talk to people. We've built a diversity council. We're doing a lot of internal dialogue, and then it takes leadership at the top. You really have to make a decision to want to go out and make choices relative to how you're going to include and improve diversity inside a corporation. So it's something that's very important to me personally. I don't like to see systemic disadvantage. That sort of upsets my core values. And so it's something that we're tackling, and it's going to take time. It's not something where you can wave a wand and make everything instantly better, but it's something we're taking very seriously, and we think we can make progress. A diversity of opinion is critically important these days, and I think a diversity of the people expressing those opinions are equally important. So more to come, and we hope to be able to really demonstrate significant progress in the quarters to come.
Thanks, Andrew. Philip, I know your editorial leadership has been working closely with the Canadian Association of Black Journalists to improve diversity and inclusion. Can you speak to us about your systemic approach across the globe and across bureaus in Canada?
Yeah, thank you. You know, like Andrew, I'm not into virtue signaling at this point. We've got a lot of work to do, and we acknowledge that that we start from a position where we need to educate people to a level within the company, so that we all believe that this is absolutely the right thing that will help our company be a better company. So mandatory training for all managers, all staff is underway, but that just gets us to a basic level. We're reaching out to a number of organizations who know far more about this than we have done traditionally, and we'll learn from them. And we've set some metrics, both in terms of hiring, but also in terms of how do people advance within an organization. It's not just about who you're recruiting, it's about the opportunities that are available to people within the company. And we've got to do a lot better than that. You know, the Globe and Mail has never had a woman editor. It's never had a woman publisher in 175 years. So I'm not going to preach to anybody about what we are doing at the moment. I'd like to work at it very, and the way Andrew said, diversity council, good representation of people from across the company who all believe that we can make a difference. But I'd like to talk about any results a long way down the road when I can feel that we've actually started to achieve something.
And Jordan, can you tell us how diversity and inclusion fits into your vision for Torstar?
First of all, I commend Andrew and Philip. I applaud the initiatives that they've taken. And I really approach this from a very personal point of view. And that is, as the father of 4 young children, I actually get emotional talking about it. So I'll hold back. But my hope really is that we as an industry and we as the Toronto Star, we owe it to our city to represent our city, the diversity of our city. We owe it to our children to take on these issues and to be leaders in an industry where we know we can hold politicians accountable, where we can hold the public and inform them and make them better informed about these decisions. And so to me, you know, I always say, and I say it internally, and I've been saying it here from when we took control or before we took control, my hope is really that we can leave this newspaper, this news organization, this city, this country in a little bit better place than we left it. And diversity is one of our key pillars of it. And I commend our team here because we have been taking it on. And Irene Gentle came in as the editor a couple of years ago as our first female editor, and we took that on. Our newsroom, our journalists, our editorial, over 50% of the team that we've hired in the last 2 years are from diverse backgrounds. We brought on the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion to do studies, and we're deep into that right now. And then we have our program where we've gone out and with our community papers, and you'll forgive me because there's 1,001 acronyms around here, but we've essentially gone out and we've dictated that a number of our journalists come from marginalized or racialized areas in the city, in the province, and we've brought them into our world to work for us. And I'm proud of the fact that a number of them have now been hired by news organizations, including our own, and others are now sort of setting their own way for things. So I think as an organization, we are we are tackling it head on. And again, I don't think we can ever do enough, but I promise you as an organization, this is something that is front and center for us, and we're tackling it every day.
One of the biggest issues of our time in our cities and our communities. I do want to hear from our journalists and from our editor. Heather, why is diversity important to audiences in telling stories and in telling the right stories?
This is something that's been the top of my priority list since becoming an editor in our market. For us, reconciliation and better, more accurate representation of Indigenous people is vitally important. And, you know, journalism in Saskatchewan, as many places, we have a record where mistakes have been made, and we needed to look at that and really acknowledge that change was needed, and we needed to be educated. So we've been on a journey around that, and that's continued into more talk of diversity. And we really appreciate Postmedia's efforts on the big picture kind of corporate scale. Individually, we've met as newsrooms and we've simply said, what can I do? And that means developing relationships. Some of the reporters have sat down and done an audit of their source lists and said, are my go-to people diverse enough? Do I have relationships built up to include voices at those pivotal moments? And prior to we just had a provincial election, and we had a meeting prior to that saying, how can we be more representative of the voters and make sure diversity is represented in those daily decisions, in those day in, day out stories? So I think it really makes a journalist feel good to say, what can I do right now myself? And it's built some positive energy. It's not easy to talk about sometimes. There's fear around it. There's people are worried about making mistakes, but we need to move forward. And I've seen progress in my time that I find very encouraging, and there's much more to come.
Thank you. Rita, you've covered inequality in the boardroom. You've covered race in the US. How are diverse perspectives important to telling stories?
Well, it comes down to your ability to execute on your business strategy at the end of the day. Years ago, a former editor at the Toronto Star said something to me which I thought was very interesting. And I think that everybody in the industry should be thinking about this. He said, you know, what is the goal of diversity policy? Is it to change the complexion of your newsroom, or is it to change the culture of your newsroom? And really, we should be attempting to change the culture of our newsrooms, because at the end of the day, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, like we are all in a position where digital subscribers are increasingly important. Our newsrooms are shrinking. We need to have the best and brightest people working. And, you know, we can set the bar really high on what we consider to be news that people will pay for. Scoops are going to be very important. Scoops of insight are going to be very important. And so set the bar high. But, you know, all that people who are visible minorities such as myself are asking for are, you know, don't try to sucker punch me while I'm trying to clear that high bar. I'm happy to clear it. This is something that I hope that our industry will get real about. You know, from here on out, I hope Philip doesn't mind me sharing that on Tuesday during his business update, he brought up the issue of dealing with microaggressions in the newsroom, or, you know, or dealing with racism. If it comes up when, you know, reporters are out on assignment, you need to have policies in place to deal with those things, protocols to deal with those things. People need to feel empowered to speak out. Now, it's very different for me as someone who's almost 46 years old to say, you know, I've encountered a problem. It's a lot harder for people who are younger. And so I hope that it's my greatest hope that people who are in management positions and in leadership positions that across our industry will reflect on their daily decision making and how it may marginalize people, whether it's that guy who always Bigfoots his female colleague, or that, manager who ices out that female, worker who should be in that meeting but isn't dealing with or somebody who makes inappropriate comments. We cannot afford to be feckless on this issue. We need to deal with it head on, because at the end of the day, if we have young reporters in particular who have their confidence shaken and don't have the appropriate role models, they're not going to have the confidence to go out and build sources and to get scoops. And it leaves money on the table that it will affect your revenue. And so my other just kind of last piece of advice here, and the reason that I'm really so focused on solutions, I don't like to just describe the dynamics of a problem. I try really hard in my columns actually to come up with practical solutions, but I would advise everyone here to think really hard about including diversity as a key plank in your risk management strategies for your individual organizations. This sort of thing leads to culture and conduct risk, is what the business community calls it, and it leads to legal risk, it leads to reputational risk, and these are things that our industry can't afford right now. So it's really my hope that we take it seriously from here on out.
Thanks, Rita. I'd like to bring in Robert Benzie to weigh in. And Rob, how are diverse voices and perspectives important to reporting on policies and politics across our country?
You know what, Natalie, they're so important. And on a personal note, I actually take this personally. My mother is from Jamaica, my father is Scottish, and like 50% of the people who live in Toronto, I was born overseas. So I'm an immigrant to this country, and I like to think that that gives me fresh eyes, so that when I cover something, even though I've been covering politics for a very long time, I try to look at a situation and think, well, how would I approach this if I was new to Canada or new to Toronto? How would I see this story, and what do I need to get out of this story? What kind of information do I need? Do I require? And Rita's right. It's actually it's aside from being the right thing to do, it's actually good for business, good for your bottom line. The more diverse your newsroom is, the better you're going to reflect the community that you cover. And I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about Jordan and Paul having bought the Toronto Star. They've made a really aggressive push to be more reflective of what the city looks like. And I think it'll be good for our bottom line. Aside from being giving better journalism, I think it'll be good for business, because more people will read your paper if they see themselves reflected in the pages. Politics in Canada is still very largely a white male preserve. It's getting better. It's still not as good as it needs to be. As I'm one of the reporters who wrote the first ever big piece on Jagmeet Singh before he was an MPP at Queen's Park, and the first time I met him, he dazzled me. I thought, this guy has star quality. And we started writing stories about him, and now he's the leader of the NDP federally, and is one of the superstars of Canadian politics. Okay, he didn't do so great in the last election, but he survived. And I think stories like that really tell me that there's a thirst for more diverse voices in politics, more politicians of different backgrounds. It's getting better. There are still not enough women involved in politics. There's still not enough diverse people from diverse backgrounds in politics, not enough Indigenous people. At Queen's Park right now, we just have the first Indigenous MPP, which is crazy in a legislature that's been around for 150 odd years. It's depressing. So I think it's getting better, but like all of society, it's not going quickly enough. So I'm hopeful that if we in the newspaper industry can better reflect our communities, telling their stories, we'll do better too.
Thanks, Rob. Moving on to the business model, COVID-19 has changed the way we do business moving forward. So what does the new normal look like to you in the news business? And Philip, I'd like to start with you.
Well, I think the new normal starts to look like a lot of remote working for a start, and that poses certain business challenges. We moved into new offices just a few years ago. We're paying a lot of money for rent. About 10% of the staff are here on any one day if we're lucky. And most people are perfectly content to work remotely. Looking at the latest announcements from some of the big players in the city of Toronto, the banks, don't expect to come back to the office until April. That's the latest guess, and I presume that applies to a lot of other large companies. So this would be a year, effectively, where we've learned what the upsides and the downsides of working remotely. And one of my concerns is what that does to your company culture. I think it's been one of the positives since moving into new offices a few years ago, that we've had a stronger sense of purpose, a greater clarity. There's been I think a lot more spirit right across the company, where we all believe that, this is what we're about. And I think there's a danger you lose that when people are scattered and not seeing each other at all. There are people who haven't been into the office in 8 months. And that probably is going to continue for at least another 4 months. So that's an internal challenge. What it's done, I think, is accelerate the decline of print advertising. Print advertising was already declining double digits each year for most people around, certainly in Europe and North America. But obviously this year, print has suffered more than other areas. It accelerates the concentration on digital, whether it's digital advertising or digital subscriptions. But just one stat from the Globe, this fiscal year, 2/3 of our revenue will be from subscriptions, and less than 30% will be from advertising. That's a very different position to what it would have been 20 years ago, and even in the last 10 years. So the pace of change that is now blowing through the industry has, I think, accelerated as a result of the impact of COVID, as we all look at what is it that is going to protect us in a period of such uncertainty. And I was asked the other day for what's the word for this year that most describe, and it's not unprecedented. For me, it's uncertainty, forecasting, being able to say what your business is going to look like in 6 months' time with a degree of certainty is still one of the things that's very challenging, I think, to a lot of people in our industry. And you can see people making mistakes. You can see people going down the wrong road. You can probably see more easily where the danger points lie. But I think that's a challenge for our whole industry as we look ahead to 2021. We're betting on digital subscriptions as the big growth area, and we think that can go on year after year if we do things right. But there are a lot of other pressures on other parts of the business.
Jordan, can you build on the growth areas or bright spots you're seeing with metro titles across the country in this new normal, and when we get to the other side of the pandemic? Did we lose Jordan, or did we lose?
Mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Philip, for
so growth areas and bright spots, Jordan.
So I think it's important. There's one thing I want to address right up front, and we have been, well before we took ownership, we've been addressing it with our team, with HR, and we talk about it at all our town halls, and we're investing significantly in it. And it is the mental health of all of our employees. And I think it's one of the things that we cannot overlook as an organization, or any organization overlook. Working remotely, it's fine to say for me to go home to my house, my 4 kids, but for a journalist that's been working here in this great atmosphere, camaraderie, all the wonderful things, that teamwork and all these things, and then you go back to your 400 square foot apartment or condo, and you have no touch of the outside world other than a Zoom call. We know that that's not healthy, and we know we're going to have serious issues down the road. So it's one of the things that we're tackling as an organization, and we've done a number of initiatives, and we're about to announce a few others. I talked a little bit at the beginning about innovation and how, I use the example of our parcel delivery services and how that's allowed us to reduce costs. We've got a number of other initiatives on that. We've doubled down on our subscriptions now. So we're now going harder than ever. We see Philip talked about it, the subscriptions and sort of lift in the fall or whatever. But with that, really, COVID has forced us to accelerate our plans with that. We've been hiring people that aren't typically news organization people, who come from the sponsorship world, from CMOs of Bank of Montreal, Michael Beckerman. And so we're, again, investing significantly in people that we feel can help really bring our ecosystem, this amazing ecosystem that we have here, and a lot of these news organizations have, and really think about it through a different lens. What is the product? How do we use data? What other wonderful things can we do to really get through these tough times and set us up? And because the way Paul and I look at it is, this is a great opportunity. And this is where great businesses are built, are in turbulent times as we're having right now. And so we are completely going for it right now in terms of that. And the final thing I'll just say is, again, is I call it content, great journalism. Rob Benzie is a wonderful example of it. He this week knocking it out of the park with a number of great pieces that he has written. Insight, he's trusted by Queen's Park. And what do you do with that? You leverage that. You take all of your team, because there are a lot of people that you don't read about day in and day out that are wonderful in this organization. And so our goal is to elevate them, to make them stars, the future stars, to take the Rob Benzies and have him really provide leadership and guidance in how he became so good at what he is, and use him as a mentor. And so I don't think there's any magic in here. I think it's just, again, me maybe being the dumbest guy on here in terms of understanding the industry. I'm just bringing, I think, very solid business fundamentals to it, and in a wonderful industry. But surrounding myself with people that I think are a lot smarter than I am is a huge part of it, and letting them go and moving quickly. Agility is a huge part. And you hear me getting a little bit passionate, but Paul and I are all about letting our people go, pushing, letting them go and doing it. And we're going to fail a few things, but we also know we're going to have a lot of success with a lot of things that we take on. And so failure is not, our worry is not failure. We want to see this thing, and we believe that we can make it work for another 128 years.
So I'd like to bring Heather into this discussion to talk about the new normal of reporting and assigning stories in this environment.
Yeah, those Teams calls are so vitally important, and it's really been a challenge to try and keep the teamwork up. But I think that some of my editors were saying the other day that there is a renewed sense of appreciation for each other. There's a sense of an acknowledgement of how much we need each other. The individual stresses that people have are very intense, and journalists, God bless us, but we can be martyrs. We're good at just going really hard, and self-care, that's for other people. I think that's emerged as a problem that needs to be addressed, and that we need each other. We need to put our hand up when we're having a hard day and let someone come in and support them. Talk about issues. As a leader, I've had to dig deep in my bag of tricks to make sure that more introverted people have an opportunity to say what's going on with them. So in terms of how a newsroom operates, we miss each other. We find little ways to connect. There's virtual coffee breaks. There's a citywide Secret Santa thing going on in Saskatoon right now. So I think that maybe some things that seem corny, but we miss each other, we appreciate each other, and we're finding ways to keep that teamwork up. And it's very necessary, because the mental health strain is important to address.
Thanks, Heather. I did promise I'd get to media technologies. So with a large portion of the Canadian public working from home amidst the pandemic, people have few options but to rely more heavily on media technologies to keep updated and to stay connected. And the fire hose of information coming to our eyes and ears daily can be overwhelming. So how do either traditional media sources, so the publishers and journalists we're talking to today, or non-traditional media sources, social media feeds, citizen journalism, stand out as being more valuable in the midst of what the World Health Organization has called an infodemic? And Andrew, I'd love to get your insights on this.
Well, sure. I think it speaks a little bit to the first question. I mean, ultimately, we're trusted purveyors of news and information, and I think that's sort of the sacred principle of this industry. And so we need to continue to do that every day. Like I said, trust is earned. Our people go out there and do an amazing job every single day. We're telling stories that are critically important. Arguably, this is one of the most important times for our industry relative to informing Canadians and people and sharing the stories that matter and disseminating the information that is so critical, and hopefully supporting policymakers where appropriate so that we can stem the tide of this difficult time and get to a better place. So I really think it's just continuing to do what this industry has done for hundreds of years. Extend that, continue it, maintain the trust, deliver news and information with integrity, and really stay true to those core fundamental journalistic principles. It's no more complicated than that.
So Andrew, I'm going to keep you with us with these massive increases in online news sites. What content trends have you noticed readers showing an interest in? And for our journalists, what are some of the pieces you see getting the most traction and hits in this environment? And I'm going to do a bit of a lightning round and give you all about 30 seconds to answer this. And Andrew, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, I'll go quick. It's probably not a surprise to anyone. It's COVID related, how COVID impacts the economy, what's going on around the world, political ramifications of COVID, and then obviously categories that are effectively shut down. So travel, tourism, sports is much lower than it's ever been. It's really just an extension of the environment that we're living in right now. And of course, human interest stories about how to manage through and stay sane in this strange and difficult time that we find ourselves in.
Philip?
Obviously coronavirus plus Donald Trump. We're not benefiting in the same way as the New York Times or the Washington Post might have done from the Trump bump, which has been going on for a long time. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Biden administration with the daily tweets missing in action from their news feed every day. But the curiosity about what's going on in the USA and the impact that might have on Canada is going to be a big story in the next few months. And interpreting that, we've got a very important financial statement coming next Monday. I think the economic implications of what's been happening to the country this year, we're about to start seeing being spelled out in a way that will need a lot of interpretation and analysis. So I think while people might want to switch off and say, I've had enough already, thank you, it's Christmas, and we'll be doing all the Christmas crossword stuff and all of that. The fact is there's a lot of very important stuff happening in the next couple of months, both in Canada and the US, that is going to give a lot of meat for our journalists to feed on, and our readers will really want that.
And Jordan, some unexpected categories or content trends that you've seen across titles over the last months?
So building on what Philip and Andrew have said, again, COVID, and we've over-indexed, and I won't say over-indexed, but we've invested heavily in that. And then education, things, homeschooling, things that have never really been top of mind. Fitness and leisure are sort of circling back, and home improvement. One of the interesting ones was this week. We had, with what went on with small businesses, and we had a lot of our advertisers, we had reaching out to us, the Canadian Federation for Independent Businesses reaching out to us. And so we were able to, and I won't say facilitate because that's not the right word, but we were able to give them a voice. And it was very important. And as I understand it, they're now at the table with the Premier, the Minister of Finance, and some terms are potentially being renegotiated. That again was because of great work on all of our organizations. You know, Rob, I commend him all the time. We look at different things going a little bit in a different sector, but I call it the gift that keeps on giving. Kevin Donovan and the work that he's done on the Sherman murders, and how he's kept that top of mind, and he has forced our legal system, the police force, etc., to release information, and he's been the one single-handedly to take it on. So again, the journalists that are on this, the journalists that are part of this, I commend them all, and never been a more important time. Philip talked about it with what's going on south of the border, and all the other wackiness in the world. There's never been a more important time for us as an organization or as an industry.
Let's go to the gift that keeps on giving. Robert Benzie, what are some of your pieces that are generating more conversation, more hits, and more traction?
Well, we you know what, Natalie, sometimes it's better to be lucky than to be good. And this week we were lucky and nailed a really good story about an alleged $11 million fraud of stolen COVID relief funds from the provincial government that was supposed to go to families, mostly of kids with special needs. I think yesterday that story alone increased our web traffic 25% in one day, which is really great. And judging from my emails, and we've been following up on the stories. We had another story in it today. We'll have another one in tomorrow's Star, because there's a hunger for COVID-19 news, but it's not always the same old COVID-19 news, if you know what I mean. People, yes, they understand that there have been concerns about testing and concerns about infection rates and all these other things. But I think what people now want to know is, how is their money being spent? Is it being spent wisely? What's up with the vaccine? My colleague in Ottawa, Tana McCharles, has done a terrific job keeping the federal government to account on vaccine plans, because it looks now like Canada is lagging other countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, and that's a concern. So those are the kind of stories that we're seeing, and we do watch very closely on what people are reading, because we want to give them more of what they want to read about and want to learn about. And sometimes readers reach out to me and give me new ideas for stories that I hadn't thought about, and that's a really, really important thing, because you can't just sit in your basement, as I am now, in fact, and just pretend that the whole world will come to you. You have to actually go out and talk to people, albeit now we're doing it virtually. But it's really, that's the one thing, Natalie, that I really miss about this time. I go to Queen's Park. I'm lucky our bureau there is open and the legislature's sitting, and I can go and I can see people from a safe social distance, and I can get news from them. And that's a really important thing, because I don't think this is sustainable, as Jordan was saying, for us to be sitting at home or in silos away from one another. We need the social interaction, and that's how we get news, frankly.
And Heather, any other non-COVID related content trends you've observed?
Well, I never thought that people of Saskatchewan could be distracted from their love of the Rough Riders, but it's actually happened. I wouldn't have bet on that a year ago. But absolutely, we've seen a gain on the video platform, which is very interesting. Maybe seeing us ask questions in person, in terms of us being a traditionally print medium, people seem to be getting used to us offering video, and that's a really great silver lining for us in this.
And Rita, last word on this question to you.
Okay, well, I'm a business columnist, so I'm partial to business news. I actually think that's where the action's at. So I would say, obviously, readers seem to have an appetite for, wanting to know what's going on behind the scenes of their favorite publicly traded companies, the places where they invest their money. One of the things that I wrote about the sanctity of bank dividends was a very, very popular topic with readers, and I've received a lot of notes saying, can you please write more on that? Corporate governance is another one that people are very interested in. As you talked about, Natalie, I've written about that as well. People are also interested in topics such as income inequality. And so, as a columnist, I try to provide these scoops of insight in the columns that I write. I would say on the news side, though, we're going to see a lot of deal activity in the next little while. This is my prediction more than anything else. And I think there's going to be a lot of attention paid to what it's kind of called the shadow banking sector, the non-bank financial players. They played such an important role in kind of the rescue of the economy through the asset purchase programs, not just of the Bank of Canada, but of the Fed. But it's very interesting that these unregulated players are part of the rescue effort. And what does that mean for the economy long-term? What does it mean for risk management long-term? All of these things seem to fascinate readers, and fascinates me a lot as well.
Thanks, Rita. I want to go back to Heather's important points about mental health. When the pandemic hit, journalists on all beats experienced high levels of stress as they pivoted to quickly cover the fastest moving story of our time. According to the results of another study conducted in June by the Reuters Institute at Oxford, participating journalists from around the world showed high levels of anxiety and depression, 70% suffering from some level of psychological distress due to the challenges and high stakes they face covering the crisis. So in this ongoing reality, how can journalists take better care of their mental and emotional well-being, and how can newsrooms best support them? And Rob, I'm going to go back to you. You are following the news, the directives, you are distilling that information, you're reporting to your readers, you're coordinating political coverage, and you're adding context to the biggest issues of the day on television on some weeks. How are you taking care of you? And what is your advice to journalists who are feeling overwhelmed?
You know what, Natalie, it is an overwhelming time. And I thought not just for journalists, we're actually lucky in a way because we've been able to work through this. So we don't have as much time maybe inside our own heads as some of our other colleagues in other, or our friends and associates and family members in other industries. But I think what I personally do is AirPods and long walks have really helped me keep my sanity in this insane time, because I can do a lot of my work by talking to people. So what I do is I go for long walks in my neighborhood. I live in downtown Toronto, and I walk down to the waterfront and walk in the Ontario Place, the Martin Goodman Trail and all that. And I talk to my sources on the phone, and they're in the same place. They're all sitting around their houses or out walking, and they're lonely and isolated, and they want to talk. And it helps me do my job, because my job is about talking to people and gleaning information and then packaging it for our readers. And it also helps my sanity, Natalie. I feel that I can actually get my head around this pandemic in a different way just by being out and about, obviously keeping my distance. I miss my local restaurants and things like that being open right now in Toronto, and that's a very tough time. It's a very tough thing for them, and it's a very tough thing for me and my wife. We like to go out, and so I miss that. But I understand, this is an extraordinary situation that we're in, and hopefully it won't last too long. I think the Star has been really supportive of us in terms of if you need employee assistance programs. We have a really good one with Morneau Chappelle that we have access to, and I think that's important, because sometimes you're working at full pace, and it's when you stop that you kind of crash. So you have to be careful of that. And the most important thing, I think, though, is communications. I mean, I talk to my colleagues in our Queen's Park Bureau every day, even though we don't get to see one another physically every day. And that's really helpful. It's because the human contact, that's the thing that people are missing the most, at least from my viewpoint.
And Philip, how is the Globe and Mail supporting any journalists and newsrooms that are experiencing this psychological distress?
Well, I think it was mentioned there, Morneau Chappelle run a good program, which we use as well for employee assistance. And I think they've been very busy. The strain is definitely telling, and we're reaching a period of the year when I think it's very important that people get a chance to get some downtime, because it's been a pretty demanding year of, working remotely has its challenges and problems, and people have adjusted to it, but it's not easy on many occasions. So the most important thing from my point of view, for what I've been stressing to managers, is more communication. We're in danger of losing some of the connective tissue. So I talk to the staff every Tuesday at 2 o'clock via video, and that's proved to be a popular way for people to shoot questions at me, get answers, clarifications, and it helps me to monitor what the mood is when you can't walk around the office and see people. You can't talk to people in the same way. So this is very important feedback for me, but I think we've all got to work harder at filling those gaps by, keeping in touch with your teams, making sure people aren't lost and lonely and feeling desperate because they have lost that sort of connection.
Rita, I'm going to go to you. How are you coping with the demands and reporting in this environment of uncertainty?
Well, it's been a really difficult time for my family. 5 of my extended family members contracted COVID, and 2 of them have died. And my younger brother is in long-term care, and I'm one of his designated caregivers, and there's currently an active outbreak at his long-term care home. So this pandemic has hit me on a very personal level. I go for weekly COVID testing so I can actually see my brother. I can't see him now, of course, because of the active outbreak at his home. It's been difficult, and it's been difficult on my children who see all of these things happening, and we can't get, it's a loss of control. But one thing that I keep telling the kids is, life's not fair, but you still have to find a way to win. For me, work has really been kind of an escape from all of that. It is something that I can actually control. I'm not very good at seeking out help or asking for help. I admit this is something that I have to work on myself, but I do have taken the children out hiking. This has been a long time passion of our family. I find that my children actually talk to me when we're walking. We've been doing this for years, and this is something that we will continue to do in the wintertime. You smell that scent of cedar and pine, and there's something really relaxing about it. So we do that. I do remind the children of our blessings, right? Nobody's gone to bed hungry. We have a home, and nobody in our immediate family, like my husband and 2 children, none of us have contracted the illness, and we're remaining vigilant. But it's not easy. It's not easy when you see that your relatives, particularly those who live abroad, are ones that you're close to, like one of my uncles who passed away. He came to my wedding, and he was the cool uncle that all the cousins really adored, and it was devastating not to be able to console his children and his wife. It's just it's been difficult. But I say the one thing that's really also helped me is that I have a manager who is very vigilant about protecting my time, and I'm not very good at asking for deadline extensions either, but I have done that in the last few months because sometimes you just hit a wall and you have to stop. So,
Rita, thank you for sharing. I did want to let our panelists know that we had some comments come in while you were speaking, commending our publishers for putting people first, and our journalists for sharing their candid responses to coping with the reporting demands amidst the pandemic. So thank you for sharing. I'm very conscious of time and have one last question that has been on the publishers' minds over this last year. Globally, there are efforts by policymakers to encourage the tech giants, the Facebooks and Googles, to do more to support publisher revenue. Here in Canada, an alliance of newspaper publishers, including those on our virtual stage, are calling on Ottawa to legislate the technology companies to pay for content and share the advertising dollars and data that flow from it. So my question to our publishers is, what can the platforms do to support the business in a more meaningful way? And is legislation necessary to the sustainability of the news business? Jordan, I know Torstar has been very vocal on this, so I'd like to start with you.
Let me start off by saying Paul and I take this very, very personally. We have 7 children between us, not together, separate, but we all know it. Facebook and Google are eating our kids alive. And if we allow them to continue the way that they are, we're going to have major, major problems. And so we as an industry have to act together. And, I start with the people that are obviously on this town hall or virtual session. We need to reach out to our leaders. We need legislation. We need to hold them accountable. We need them. There has to be a level of integrity and ethics that is brought to what they do. And we can be the ones to force that issue. The legislation, you know, Paul and I have been to Ottawa, and we've reached out to the leaders, and we've got a wonderful Minister of Heritage, Guilbeault, who is very supportive of it. But what we need is an example, like they've done in Australia or in France. And in Australia, they're actually enacting legislation, and they're going to use an arbitration. And the media industry is going to be compensated. I can't imagine you going into McDonald's, stealing the recipe, stealing the equipment, and then opening a restaurant next door and being allowed to operate it. That's just not that. We would never allow it to happen in any other industry. Why would we allow it to happen in this, which is our most important, or one of the most important industries in the country and in the world? So we have to take on Ottawa. We have to hold it. And the thing that I would just say is, you know, and to steal a little bit of what's going on south of the border and with what Joe Biden is saying, united, we are stronger. If we stay together and we are united in this fight, we will make great things happen. If we are splintered off, if the tech giants, which they have a lot of money and they throw it at us and they take on other news organizations and splinter us, then we lose our voice. But together, we're very, very strong, and we're very, very powerful.
Jordan, I'd like to move over to hear from Andrew, and then Philip will go to you for the last word on this question. Andrew?
Thank you. I think it's incredibly important. You know, coming from the technology industry before I joined media, you know, I have a good understanding of how Silicon Valley approaches things. And I think what people need to understand is, I think, two really important points. One, we've talked about this throughout the panel. The consumption of news media has never been higher. We have record audiences across all of our platforms, whether it's in Canada or any country around the world. There is a voracious appetite for news media content, and it costs a lot of money to produce. And simultaneously, we've never been so challenged as an industry to monetize that content. So that is a strange situation. You know, in a normal disruption, people stop wanting to buy your product. A new and better product comes along. I saw that at BlackBerry on both sides. And in this situation, you have a dichotomy where more and more people consume what you're producing, and you're simultaneously so challenged in earning a fair return against that. And so I think it's really important that people understand that in spite of all the innovation that's occurred in our industry, there's a trope out there that news media organizations dropped the ball, or they fell asleep at the switch. And maybe that was true 10 years ago, but that's not true now. And whether you're a news media organization or whether you're a brand new digital entrant like a Vox Media or a Vice Media, everyone is equally challenged monetizing content digitally. So this is a problem that is not restricted to any one player. We have monopolies that are creating a market failure. And I do believe that governments around the world are waking up to this issue. And it's critically important that we find ways to level the playing field. And that doesn't mean that you prop all players up. We need an environment where people can succeed or fail. But right now, what everyone needs to understand is everyone is challenged except for two players, and that's Google and Facebook.
Philip, last word on striking the balance with the tech companies?
Yeah, so my concern is I've been in the industry a long time. I've worked within regulated industries like broadcast, and I haven't liked the experience of working within a regulated industry. So I am wary of government regulation. However, what we see happening in other parts of the world, like Europe and the USA, is that this is why Google and Facebook are now responding in a way that they weren't previously doing. Because in the USA and in Europe, actions are taking place which is effectively forcing Google and Facebook to respond. But my concern is that regulation, particularly with this, with the government we have in place in Canada, takes quite a long time. We've got government programs allegedly helping our industry, which were put in place to begin operating in the beginning of 2019. Newsroom subsidies. To my knowledge, nobody's received $1 yet, and here we are at the end of 2020. So people are claiming the money in their, it's on their accounts, but the actual flow of the money has never happened still. So the process that you have to wait for government regulation, I'm not sure it's going to come early enough to help a lot of the players in our industry who actually are in danger now. They were at risk before. COVID has increased that risk, and I don't think they've got the time to wait for regulation to work its way through the system.
Thank you, Philip. And with that, we are at time. Even amidst this challenging environment, there's been a good deal of passion and optimism in today's discussion and some bright spots for the future of news. Journalism matters and is in high demand. It has been my privilege to moderate this discussion on Newspaper Day with some of Canada's top publishers and journalists. On behalf of the entire audience, I want to thank our panel for sharing their expertise and their insights to make this a conversation we can all benefit from. Stay well, everyone, and back to you, Norman Lang.
Thanks, Natalie. And a special note to you, just an incredible job that you did today, moderating the panel. Great questions. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your great commentary and your time with us today. To our panelists, you spent an incredible amount of time with us today, provided us with some great insights and some great things to think about. So Jordan, Robert, Philip, Rita, Andrew, Heather, thank you on behalf of the Advertising Club of Toronto for your time today. Really greatly appreciate it. So for all, our day is now at a close, and it's our hope that you enjoyed yourself today. And if you were to take away one or a couple of key points back to your office, to your home, to your small business, we think today from our panel discussion that we've achieved our objective. We'd like to thank you for your ongoing support of the Advertising Club of Toronto, and we'd like to thank again our sponsor, News Media Canada, and we'd like to leave you with a short video. It's only 60 seconds, so I hope you can hold and stay with us for this important message from Haley Alsacer, highlighting the Champion the Truth initiative. We hope to see you again next year, and thank you so much again for your time.
Hey Newspaper Day attendees, my name is Haley Alsacer and I teamed up with News Media Canada to launch the Champion the Truth collection, a limited edition newspaper inspired collection. With masks, tees, and totes, the collection is a celebration and recognition of the essential service newspapers provide by delivering credible, diverse, local, and original journalism in Canada. The collection is inspired by my Opa, aka Grandpa, Ozzie Alsacer, who is a proud owner and publisher of the Merry Herald newspaper for many years in British Columbia. This exclusive collection features the words news and truth in languages spoken across Canada and includes my iconic mouse print. This design really highlights the strength of Canada's diversity and reflects the importance of newspapers as an essential service providing credible, factual reporting and a voice for local communities across our country. All proceeds from the sales of the collection will be donated to CJFE, Canadian Journalists for Free Expression. Learn more now and shop the collection on HaleyAlsacer.com.